Hello, everyone. Sorry about the little delay there, but so my name is Richard Hess. I'm part of the immersive experiences team in Barcelona. Sorry, is this the? I think this is the older deck, but that's okay. So yeah, our job in our team is to look at emerging technologies and help industrialize them or scale them across the whole organization. So going into it, if we look at Nestle at an average day, we look across these three sectors. So first off, we sell 1 billion products per day. This is individual products of packaging that is sold each and every day across the organization. We sell in around 190 markets or countries around the world. And we make them in around 413 factories. So if you look at this is a massive scale that we have to do each and every day across everywhere from where it's sourced, from farms in different areas around the world, all the way to ending up into consumers' hands and being able to be purchased and used at the home. If we take a look at tech and where it's fundamentally changing mindsets and shopping behaviors and food expectations of our consumers, it's really impacting the way that we have to think about how we engage our consumers, how we are able to interact with them, and really influence and see what's the best way of having that communication channel with them. You combine that with where there's all these other companies that are being born digitally native. We're a 150-year-old company, and it's really hard to turn that ship and get it to focus into different emerging technology areas which have a big impact. So we need to kind of manage that and be able to channel that. So if we look at what's relevant in XR to Nestle, or where it has a kind of value added, or where it's impacting us, we can look across the whole spectrum from consumer focus all the way to enterprise. So whether, again, it's in a factory or where it's in the hands of the consumer, we're able to kind of look across that chain and see where it provides impact across our spectrum. So if we do kind of narrow it down into the consumer side, this is kind of where we focused on first initially, of where it was more mature to us, whereas in maybe the factory side for 3 to 5 years ago, we're still doing a lot of experiments, trying different form factors, different platforms, and seeing what was a good fit. But from the consumer side, that kind of felt like the right time to say, hey, we can kind of move into scale now and see where it can provide value globally for our brands. So if we take a step back, XR is not new to Nestle, and AR certainly is kind of a big focus for us. If we go all the way back to 2011, we were doing augmented reality packaging around cereals. And even back then, the mobile technology wasn't even that advanced. It was something that was still, we were even telling consumers to put the package in front of the laptop camera to activate the AR on that. So it's something we were still even experimenting at the time and trying to figure out if this is a good medium for us. We even move into, say, 2014 with Google Glass launching. We were testing out those form factors, and we've probably tested out most of the popular either smart glasses or AR headsets since then, different platforms, and really kind of testing out and seeing what was appropriate engagement or value added with those type of headsets. We move into, say, 2015, 2016, when VR started picking up again, doing a lot of activations around that. One big activation we did was around Kit Kat. We created a virtual world called Breakland that had different games or activations that you could go in, you can take a break in the VR world and try that. That was where something like Google Cardboard to do that. So we were experimenting a lot, sometimes very small, sometimes much bigger engagements, but it was something that we're doing. I highlight this one in particular because this was a campaign with our brand Milo, which is a powdered chocolate milk drink. And this is really the one where we kind of went all in on having a huge marketing campaign, making AR the core component of a bigger activation ecosystem through the Milo Champ Squad, which is a program where you would have a mobile app, a kind of wristband that was enabled with the mobile app to kind of track activity. And we use augmented reality to, say, scan the package, see a little bit of your favorite football players, performing different moves. We made that into engagement that was, gamified it, had different content over time. You would scan the package 2 weeks from now, you get different content. So this was our big foray into it at the time. And this was around 2016 when we did this. But what did we learn from this? Well, there was a couple key areas. The first was we overspent a lot on this. We hired a really big agency to come in, present a lot of different ideas, say, hey, augmented reality is a great piece for you. Great, let's do that. Usually what happens in these scenarios, what we've learned is that they will say, we can provide you augmented reality, and they turn around and they say, hey, to a company you would see out here, Nestle wants augmented reality. How can you help them do that? This causes us to pay a premium and doesn't really capture a lot of learnings from that because it's all kind of kept within that agency model. The second was knowledge loss. So the people on the ground that were activating this primarily were, say, brand managers or innovation managers that were in more of the brand or marketing side. So when they, when they were the ones that were activating this, that kind of turnaround for them, they're in a brand for 2 to 3 years and then they're moving on. So a lot of the lessons learned, whether good or bad, they were not kind of passing those on to the other brand for the next activations that they did. The third is that this was siloed. So even though we launched this in multiple countries, it was all contained within that brand, and those learnings weren't cascaded to the rest of the organization in other brands, so that then they could activate this as well. So around 2017, this is at another time where we were building capabilities in Barcelona, which is where we're based out of, essentially building a global IT hub that would allow us to take different technologies, not just augmented reality, but say web CMS or marketing automation tools and things like that, and really build global capabilities there. So no different augmented reality, we decided to do that around 2017, and we got this question, or this answer. It's, okay, run an RFP for global capabilities. Okay, run an RFP on what, right? If we take a look back at what early 2017 was in the industry, at least for marketing or consumer side of things, you essentially, you had no AR kit or AR core, right? So you had to look at third-party, say, software development kits, SDKs, in order to activate this experience on mobile devices. You had mobile app-based experiences, so you either needed to create your own mobile app or have a partner mobile app. The cutting edge at the time was something like Google Tango, which is on the screen, where you needed a specific phone to activate that experiences. And content was really expensive. It still is to a degree, but even back then it was much more expensive, right? So we took a look at what our initial scope was, and we said, okay, it's probably around these 3 areas, right? What are the SDKs or software development kits that we need to have in order to enable mobile augmented reality? What is the content platforms or essentially AR CMSs that we could utilize to help us create this content, manage it, distribute it, capture analytics on it to see how the performance of campaigns are doing? And what was the right content creation players? So not just a creative agency that says they can do a little bit of everything. Who were the people that were kind of born native to this area and were kind of doing a lot of the stuff in this space, essentially AR, VR, creative studios to help us do this. All kind of underlined by app development, because that was what the medium was at the time. So if we take a look at then what happened that year and what the pace of change in AR versus the traditional processes of trying to do this from a big global IT perspective, we started in a discovery phase in March. Camera effects is announced by Facebook. We have landscape vendors, AR kits announced. We launched an RFP, AR cores announced. We announced winners, and then Lens Studios announced. So doing that traditional RFP process where it takes a very long time in a big organization, especially when they're looking at it with a big sourcing strategy, to where the pace of change in the industry was going, completely changed by the end of when we ran that RFP. So we kind of looked and we're like, we need to do this better. There's a better approach probably that we can take a look at when trying to do this. So we kind of took a look at it like this, applying some, say, lean startup or rapid prototyping methodologies. Say, how can we continuously scout, talk to as many people as we can, look at the newer technologies or capabilities coming into the space. How do we continuously test and learn? So test out these new capabilities and learn really quickly from them, decide what's working and what's not, and pivot where needed. how do we rapidly scale this? So take them from these successful tests and then say, how do we broaden this out, run pilots, potentially onboard these partners to build out global capabilities. And then at the end of the day, how do we build a roster of partners that can have multiple capabilities in different areas, right? We've worked with people before that have gone bankrupt, that have been acquired, that have pivoted their entire value proposition of them as a company. So we looked at how do we have multiple people that maybe have some overlap, but gives us some flexibility in case of the times and changes. And we kind of had this way of looking at it as like, how do we crawl, walk, and run, right? So one area we kind of did this is when we started looking at web augmented reality. So web augmented reality hit the market, say, late last year. You had companies like Eighth Wall and doing that. They were actually building viable business models. So it was coming out of something that was more open source, which is a bit harder to do in an organization and get, say, security and compliance people involved, and more into this is people are building business models around. How do we start engaging them? How do we start then running limited tests with these startups and saying, okay, let's test some stuff out, try some stuff in say this market, or do something we can put in front of consumers and see how they react and capabilities there. How do we onboard and roadmap with them to say, okay, now that we're bringing you on, what can you do with your product that will help us, and vice versa? What could help us, you could probably sell to other competitors, which we're okay with that mutual trade-off. And then how do we build a roster of partners that can have, again, multiple capabilities in this area? And we saw we were able to kind of do this in 4 to 6 months. It's still not as fast as we would like it to be, but at least this, comparing this with what we were doing before, where we do a 9-month process before even starting, at least now, by the end of 4 months, we'd have something that was actually in the marketplace that we could build off of. So to show a couple examples, so this is one that we did with Nespresso using web augmented reality. This one is Nespresso had a partnership with National Geographic to take pictures in these remote locations where coffee beans are sourced. We worked with our partners Zapper to kind of bring this to life through web augmented reality. It is a very simple web augmented reality experience, but it is effective, right? You're seeing where the picture comes to life at that farm, and you're being able to get some of that content in that type of environment, which is more of a art gallery setting. We then have some examples of, say, using web AR or some of the quick look functionalities in phones to place, say, point of sales displays. So arming, say, a sales rep with something like this, where they sell these coffee corners in, say, a gas station or supermarket. Being able to give them something like a QR code that they just scanned and they're able to do it pretty quickly is really effective. And they can then give that to the potential customers so they can try it themselves so they don't have it sold. Same, say, for something like e-commerce, using the quick look functionality on a website. You're going through and say, hey, tap to see what this Nespresso machine looks like in your house before you purchase it and see the new models. This is something that has tangible kind of value added, even though, again, it's a very simple activation. So if we took a look at what we were doing before versus this new model that we're following, we kind of saw results in these 3 areas, right? When we go back to where we were having trouble, we were overspending. We're seeing around an 87% reduction or cost avoidance in what we were doing before versus what we were doing now. So a huge difference than using that big agency model and working directly with the partners themselves. We now have a dedicated team in Barcelona of multiple people that are focused in this area. They're tapped into all the AR/VR projects that are happening globally. So you're able to have a global view on that and kind of guide and direct other markets on how they can operate themselves. And then that siloed approach, now capturing from a global perspective, running over 50 projects in around 40 countries right now, both from a smaller scale to a larger scale of multiple brands launching activations in 32 countries at the same time. One example of this is what we did with our CPW brand, Serial Partners Worldwide. This is another Zapper activation, but it's scanning the cereal box or the packaging to bring this to life. Again, going back to we sell 1 billion individual products a day. Something like this and digitizing packaging has a big effect. We did this with a partnership with Disney to promote the new Lion King. And although it's again, it's not exactly augmented reality. It is a scanning thing, but it is something that has a lot of impact, and we saw a lot of repeat usage, almost 2 to 3 times people scanning it again and again. And it's something that has a lot of impact when you do this at scale, and you start to build those economies of scale. So I talked a lot about the consumer side, but what about enterprise? We are not ignoring enterprise. In fact, we're probably doing more in this area than we are on the consumer side. But we've taken a long journey to get there. And to take a step back, I'd say if you look at our R&D network, so Nestle is the largest R&D organization by total investment in the entire food and beverage industry, and we have multiple R&D centers around the world. But if you take a look at the dots in blue, these are what we call our product technology centers. They essentially operate as these, for lack of a better term, sandbox factories. So they're places where you're allowed to try a lot of new digital things in a kind of more open environment, something that we would test a lot before we would ever put onto a full production line in that capacity. The thing was, in a lot of these factories, we've been doing, again, AR, VR for a lot of years. Going back 5, 6 years, we've been trying out a lot of different things, but often a lot of these didn't come to scale. We would try a couple form factors, like, yeah, it's okay, it's too heavy, maybe it's not there. Or when they did want to do that, they'd run into problems of, say, bringing this onto the internal network, bandwidth issues at factories. So we never really got to scale at all, where we would put it, say, on 100 production lines. However, it does feel like the winds of change are coming, and we're seeing a lot more flexibility in the space that we're able to start to scale over time, especially in 2020. So for our focus in enterprise going into next year, it's really around these 3 areas, and these probably shouldn't be a surprise to you, but it's around things like augmented instructions. So step-by-step instructions to either through smart glasses or AR headsets to understand a new task, or to onboard an employee for the first time, getting them familiar with a new system. Remote assistance. So again, we have 413 factories around the world. So how do you get experts in to some of these factories, sometimes in very remote places around the world, and have them be able to help people on the ground and help troubleshoot some complex problems. And the last one, more broadly, around VR training and onboarding. So how do we train employees to upskill themselves in new areas, or onboard employees for the first time, make that more efficient, more unassisted as it was before? So if we look at these kind of 4 areas, this is what I say is the catalysts that we have, say, for this year, that have really kind of made us start to think, now we need to scale up. So the first one, I would say, being around HoloLens 2, right? And all the other AR headsets that have come since that announcement at Mobile World Congress earlier this year. It's really starting to feel like, the functionality in these things is reaching a place that is going to be much more immersive than what we've tried before. And when they start bringing, say, down the weight of the headsets, which was the #1 complaint that we had, was this is great, but I can't wear it for more than 30 minutes. We start to get into a place where actually people can see themselves wearing it, throughout the day. The second being around, I use the example here of Oculus for business, but as well as Vive having enterprise offerings on their end. Again, really big challenge for having these devices be kind of scaled is getting them onto our network, fulfilling all the security requirements, compliance requirements that's required from our teams there. So now that these companies started offering enterprise offerings that would allow us to, say, deploy these and register these devices at scale, this becomes something that is, very, very interesting to us to be able to do that, to take it out of that demo showroom environment of we have it in one room on a guest network or a test network, and being so it could be in every office just sitting at somebody's desk. The third around, actually getting repeatable ROI on some of these use cases. So this one looking at remote assistance. I think this is using Scope AR, but seeing that we could actually have reported back successes on something like this. And of course, this is one of the ones that have been around for the longest, but you start combining with newer technologies, World Tracking SLAM, and it becomes more of a enriching experience. It's something where it's kind of convinced us we need to go all in. Last on the in the bottom right there is around authoring tools. So, you're starting to see a lot of skill sets entering the marketplace where it's kind of required to say, hey, we need Unity developers. We need people that have skill set in these areas. More companies are building creative services around this. Similarly, inside the company, we have people that are kind of upskilling their own knowledge of this. So these tools are enabling us to, say, be able to develop this content where before it was cost prohibitive to do so. So a couple of examples of what we're doing in the enterprise space. This one's with Purina in the US, and using VR to, say, have employees go to different factories around there. These are employees, say, that are at our headquarters that maybe don't go into factories very often. They're either working on, say, marketing or IT systems or things like this. And being able to kind of put them into there, be able to kind of go through the factory, see a lot of different ways of how those people are working to help educate them on how they can do their job better, knowing what they're supporting down the line. The second area is around that we've done. We've built an internal product called Henry 360, which is a VR kind of 360 video platform. And the idea around this was this concept of pre-boarding. So even before the employees start their first day, say they got the job offer and they're waiting a couple weeks to start, how could we give them, say, some content in a headset to learn more about the company even before they walk into the door? And see immersive video from the CEO, from their team, to learn different processes and acronyms you'd find in a big organization. This is the kind of whole concept around this. So moving on, so how do we organize these internally into our organization? So first off, like a lot of other big companies, we're undergoing a digital transformation of moving from our IT, thinking of a service-oriented organization to a product organization. So how we try to categorize this is by, when we talk to our stakeholders, some of these as internal products. Now, obviously, we're not developing our own proprietary AR tracking technology as a product, but we are kind of working with partners and saying, categorizing them as this is the products that we can offer you. So on the left side, the more mature where we are right now is more looking at consumer AR. How do we reach consumers on whatever channel you can activate augmented reality experience on a mobile device? We would have technology solution and partners that could help you do that. AR preview, how do we allow consumers and sales reps to see different either products or objects, say point of sales displays, in their physical space, and being able to have, again, technologies, partners, and solutions to do that. And then on the enterprise side, we're fully committed into focusing into 2020 of having products built around these areas to help us scale at that. So at the end, I'll kind of leave a bit of like, where are we going from here? Something like this, if you've ever seen the hyper reality video is another example it brings to life, where we'll show examples like this and we'll get a range of emotions. We'll have the security people horrified. We'll have the brand and marketing people a bit frustrated that maybe their message will be lost in everything being augmented. You have the packaging design people that are a bit intrigued, sometimes excited to say, hey, if I could digitize packaging and have personalized messages for each person, depending on what they want, that will kind of revolutionize packaging. I think at the end of the day here, it's just important to note that the way we try to see it internally when we start these things is, what is the problem you're solving and what is the value you're adding back, especially on the consumer side. This type of technology is inherently cool, and there are a lot of people in our organization that just want to be part of it because it is that. But when we do these things, we have to think about, at the end of the day, what is the value we're providing back and how people are going to perceive this. Because if we try to just make it cool and something like that, people will consume it in 30 seconds and then they won't care, right? So it's always looking, where's the value, where's the utility, how is this going to help that person and enriching their experience. So with that,
that was great. Thank you. Give it up for Richard Hess. This was really super.